Riley, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me on.
It is great to have you. So for many people that don't know your background leading up to how you've gained so much notoriety in your fight against what I think is really just logic and common sense, give us just your background before you got to Kentucky and this whole story became a story. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. So I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. I started swimming at the age of 4, of course, all the way through college. So I've dedicated 18 years of life to swimming. But I was very fortunate to be highly recruited, and so I eventually committed to the University of Kentucky, where I had the most amazing experience. Of course, our college experience was nothing abnormal because we dealt with COVID. So we were robbed my sophomore year of our NCAA championships in that way. Our championships were supposed to take place in March, but of course COVID took the U.S. by storm in March. So we worked all year, got canceled. So we come back. Junior year, I had a pretty great season, but I knew I wanted to win a national title. And I knew that was something I was capable of doing. And so my senior year, we come back, big goals, I'm doing amazing, until the NCAA announced that the women would be competing against biological male Lia Thomas.
Yep.
Lia Thomas was, of course, a male swimmer who swam 3 years on the men's side at University of Pennsylvania, at best ranking 462nd in the nation, and now was trailing the women's category by seconds in multiple events.
Yeah, this story is so interesting because, as you mentioned, Lia Thomas, University of Penn, which is right here in the heart of Philadelphia. I spent 4 years living in Nashville, so I know your story, having gone from Tennessee and gone as a recruit to the University of Kentucky. And I have 8-year-old twin daughters, and they compete in gymnastics and dance. So this really connects with me and resonates with me on every level. But, you were blackballed essentially from Twitter for saying that only 2 sexes exist. And now you have taken this next step to kind of be a spokesperson or a spokeswoman, with an independent women's forum to save women's sports. So what has the last year or two been like for you in regards to being denied really on multiple levels by a pandemic and then by biological males? What have the range of emotions been like for you?
It has been unique, interesting, but most importantly, it's been so eye-opening. This past year, I've learned so much about how the media works, how politics work, all of the things. My life plans have changed drastically. I was supposed to be in dental school this year, but I decided to put off dental school for a year while I advocate for this because I guess I didn't finish my full story. But what happened at our NCAA championships was it was not progressive. We were not moving forward. This whole inclusivity and kindness, it's not kind. It's not inclusive. We're excluding the very athletes that Title IX was created to protect. And so at our NCAA championships, that first day, of course, Thomas won the national title, but that second day of competition, we raced in the 200 freestyle, which ultimately resulted in a tie, almost impossibly enough. And so after tying, we go behind the awards podium, and the NCAA official looks at us and he says, "Great job, you guys tied, but Lia takes the trophy home." And I, of course, questioned this because I was confused. We tied. Why is he so adamant on giving this trophy to Lia over myself? And so I asked him, and he says, "Well, Lia has to hold the trophy for pictures. You can pose with this one, but you go home empty-handed. Lia takes the trophy." And so that's truthfully what thrusted me into the position that I'm in and made me realize that dental school will always be there. My life plans I thought I had, but the relevance and the importance behind this issue might not be, and there is so much more at stake fighting for this. And so this past year, it's been eye-opening. That's the word I'll use to describe it.
Hey, Riley, Dawn Stensland. I'm the news person for Nick Kayal and Kayal and Company News Live. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. But there's a piece of this, I think as a woman, I work mostly with men, but I have a separate restroom. I can't imagine being in the restroom or a changing area and have what you experienced and other students student athletes, right? When you went in that locker room, could you just describe, because to me, if what happened to me happened, I probably would call 911 and have somebody arrested. Can you tell us what you experienced, Riley?
Of course. So that first day of competition, we obviously knew that we would be sharing the pool with Lia, but we had no idea what the locker room situation would look like. And so I think that's important to say because we were not forewarned we would be sharing a changing space. We did not give our consent. No one asked for our consent. But that did not stop the NCAA from forcing us to share a changing space to which we were fully exposed because the swimming locker room, it's not necessarily a place of modesty. Growing up swimming, you almost become comfortable being vulnerable in that situation, though. The suits you put on, it takes about 15 minutes to put on these tiny suits, and, of course, those 15 minutes to which you're fully exposed. But I can't even tell you the feeling of betrayal and belittlement and embarrassment and just uncomfortableness, of course, and awkwardness. There's so many feelings when you turn around in that locker room and there's a 6'4" biological male equipped with and exposing male genitalia in the same area that you are fully exposed. This was worse than the unfair competition piece because to me, a year ago, this would have been considered some form of sexual harassment. Yeah. It would have been considered voyeurism, indecent exposure, and you could call 911 and expect this person to go to jail. But now, not only is it just happening, it's being celebrated, it's being encouraged, and all these people have to do to get in these spaces is say they are a woman. That's the only requirement. I felt like we should have had people who were supposed to be protect us, our coaches, our parents, people within the NCAA, but these people were not protecting us. They were perpetrating this.
Riley Gaines is joining us here on Kayal and Company, former swimmer at the University of Kentucky, kind of leading the charge and fighting the battle for female sports. I'm curious because you have well over 30,000 followers on Twitter. I am one of those for sure. And you've been very outspoken and vocal about this. I'm curious to see what type of reaction do you get? I mean, I can't imagine it's all overwhelmingly positive. Do you face a lot of negative comments on social media, bullying, harassment for your stance on two genders and really just trying to fight for equality with women's sports?
Truthfully, not a ton. There's so much more support. Even this past week, it was our swimming NCAA championships, and so it's been one full year since we had Lia Thomas competing against the women. But I went back to watch my teammates this year, and I had so many parents, so many athletes, so many coaches, athletic directors who approached me privately, of course, and said, thank you for doing what you're doing. We appreciate you. We can't speak out because these athletes are in positions where they've signed scholarships and they're essentially owned by their schools, and their schools are suppressing their voices, which that's a whole piece. I don't know if we have time today to even discuss the freedom of speech issue that this is because, and that's a lot scarier than just the fairness in sports piece. These universities, and this applies to both the students and the people within the administration, they are suppressing their voices. They're intimidating them. They're threatening them. They're emotionally blackmailing them into staying silent. Same with parents. They work corporate jobs, and they're terrified to use their voice. And so they don't feel comfortable speaking out. Lia Thomas's teammates, what they went through on a daily basis from their University of Pennsylvania made them go to mandatory LGBTQ meetings. They made them or when they were concerned about the locker room piece and they sent an email to their administration responded with, if you feel uncomfortable seeing male genitalia, here are some counseling resources you should seek. They were told that they are responsible if any harm comes towards Lia Thomas's way. They were told that they can't use their voice because their school has already used their voice for them. So there's so much silencing that goes on. But back to your question, in regards to the negative comments I get, it's all personal attacks. It's all, maybe you should have just trained harder. You should have swam faster. you're ugly, you're just white and blonde and overprivileged, and you've had everything you've ever wanted your whole life. And it's just so silly. The things they say, they don't bother me. They don't hurt my feelings because I'm secure. I'm secure in my faith. I'm secure because I have an amazing support system. And so when I get those comments, it says more about the people saying the comments than it does about myself.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think a majority of people, to your point, as to why you don't receive a ton of backlash, I think an overwhelming majority of people agree with you. There are only two sexes, and a biological male competing against a biological female is a major mismatch and a disadvantage, and it's not fair. But most people are afraid to share that opinion because if you don't fall in line with the left, well, then they will silence and censor and suppress you, and you can lose your job. And you mentioned, people that work in the corporate world, if they would go to their Facebook and share that belief, they would be out of a job before 5 p.m. today with an email. So I do think that is interesting. But what is the future for women's sports? Because we see so many stories these days with transgender athletes, and it's not even at the college level. It's at the high school level and even lower than that. So what exactly does the future of women's sports look like 5 or 10 years from now?
It's a scary thought. This is something that's progressed so quickly, even the past, I guess it's been happening. It would probably be naive for me to say it's happened quickly, but I feel as if it's really happened quickly. This past year, maybe 2 years, men have infiltrated into women's sports, women's spaces. And notice how it's not happening from biological women infiltrating into men's sports. And there's obviously an easy answer as to why that is, and it's because these women can't be competitive with men because there are inherent advantages that men have. But you're exactly right. It's happening all over. The left, they constantly like to push out the narrative that it's a non-issue. Why are we taking precedent? It's not really happening. There's only 4 high school students in the state of Kansas that this is happening to. Why is Kansas having to deal with this? But that could not be further from the truth. I could list off example after example after example of this happening, all sports, all ages, all divisions. It's happening in college. It's happening in master's divisions. It's happening as young as I talked to a parent the other day whose 6-year-old daughter's cheer team, which when you're 6 years old and you're on a cheer team, you're just throwing around your pom-poms. But they have a little boy who identifies as a little girl on their cheer team who's flipping up and down the court. And I believe this was a parent in Iowa. And so it's happening all over, all ages, all divisions. And it's scary to think about the future of women's sports because, of course, Title IX was enacted 51 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was created to celebrate the uniqueness of women. In regards to athletics, of course, it was supposed to stop discrimination on the basis of sex across all colleges and universities. But we are discriminating on the basis of sex. What's happening now is we're not discriminating on the basis of gender identity, but that is not what Title IX was created to uphold. And so to think about where this looks like in 5-10 years, this is a slippery slope. And if it's not handled, it will be not just one transgender athlete winning a national title in the women's division. It'll be 3 and 5 and 10 and so on.
Riley, I got to point out one flaw, one issue with everything. And this is something I have to mention because you lived in Nashville. I believe you grew up lifelong Nashville, Tennessee resident?
Absolutely.
How do you end up at Kentucky and not in Knoxville at the University of Tennessee? I mean, come on, man.
My dad, he was an SEC football player at Vanderbilt. And so growing up, we were not allowed to wear orange. We were not allowed to sing Rocky Top, none of that. And so he was okay with Kentucky, but there was no orange in my household. Okay,
fair enough. Well, continue on with the fight at Riley_Gaines_, and the last name is spelled Gaines. Thank you so much for the time, and keep up the good work.
Of course. I'll actually be at University of Pittsburgh this month, to which it's getting a lot of backlash. And so I encourage your listeners to look it up and kind of realize the backlash that it's getting. And I encourage them to be there and be present and be supportive. So
all right.
Thank you so much for having me on.
You got it. Thank you very much, Riley.
Bye.
There she is, Riley Gaines.